Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Kevin McDonald. I am your host for today. Well, actually, I'm kind of your host every day, but that's beside the point. We've got a great guest for you today. His name is Stephen. Now, Stephen, is it Rowley or Rowley?
You got it right the first time. Rowley.
Rowley. Perfect. He is, by the way, I have to tell you, you live in maybe one of the most pristine, beautiful places on the entire planet. And but I have to tell you this, that nobody's allowed to move there because there's snakes everywhere. And that's the only downside is there snake and it's always rainy and it's cold and it's icky, but it's a beautiful area. And there's Bainbridge Island in Washington State.
Potholes. We have a lot of potholes. And we have more than our fair share of woke people. So there you go.
We have people that are all awake and everything, whatever that. I'm not even sure I even have a definition for what woke means, but
well, you know, I've just been listening to Bill Maher's new book on Audible, and he does a really great riff on wokeness. So I'll just recommend that to you.
Very good, very good. You are, first of all, you're an author.
Yes.
But in your previous life, you were a teacher. You have a BA. You're a psychotherapist. You were in K-12 and higher education. You were a major in math and psychology. You earned your PhD in administration and policy. This is going to take a while to read. So if you want to come back, we can. No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
It's great to have you here, and you are doing a tremendous amount of work, and you're doing a lot of good for humanity. And
thank you.
And I really appreciate you coming here to talk to us.
One other thing I'm up to. Well, first of all, the name of the book is it's a memoir called I'm liking The Lost Coin: A Memoir of Adoption and Destiny. And maybe this will come up later. But also, I got invited to do an online course, three class course in early July at Olympic College. The title of which is going to be called "Becoming Me: Why Is It So Difficult? Why does it have to be so difficult?"
That is with a great
with a Jungian twist, but lots of it's not a lot of, well, it's just I'm talking for the first while, but mostly photobombing people with all kinds of illustrations of what I'm talking about. So it should be entertaining at least.
Oh, and when is that going to happen?
It's the first three Mondays of July. I'll send you an announcement once they have it out there.
Oh, that would be great, because it would be fun to listen to, because, you know, as our opening goes, one of the things that is a major question in all of our lives at one point or another is, why am I here and what am I here to do? And it has to be more than what I've been told and what I can see. So there must be more. And that's one of the things that you do in all of the work that you do, is you help people understand a little bit more about what being more is and what they are really here to do.
Right.
Which is really
I think this thing about discovering purpose, I mean, tons of people have written about it. It's a minor obsession for mine, that bigger question. I'm not sure it's something that we, stumble over a rock one day and look underneath the rock, go, oh, here it is. This is the answer I was looking for. But if we're engaged in a journey, a process of self-discovery, in some cases, meaning seems to be, kind of the carrot in front of the mule, where you keep walking to get it. It's just elusive. On the other hand, if we understand the purpose and mystery of search itself, we find resonance with that process and resonance with what it seems to be driving us, both from within and even sometimes without. But where that drive comes to know more about who we are and how we manifest, even when we do something, well, that was really my purpose. Like your one purpose for you is doing your podcast. It doesn't mean that's your entire life purpose, but you found, assuming you may find a great deal of satisfaction and meaning in doing it, but there's more than that.
Well, there is, but it is part of my overall plan of who I am and who I really have chosen to be. And in my case, it was like when I was 42, 20 years ago or so, I was I'd been in management, and I had the house, had the kids, had the wife, had the dogs, had the picket fence, and all that. But I wasn't really happy, and I didn't feel like I was doing within my life what I really could be doing, what I wanted to do. And
Mhm.
so,
Mhm.
but the problem is, and you're right, is we don't really know, even when we start on this journey of looking for who we are, we don't know until it shows up sometimes.
Right, right. It's I think this is part of tapping into part of what I'm going to be talking to in my first class. But part of this is that I think we go through. We're composed of layers and stages, so we go through, and those stages can last a long time. Um, Even in astrology has those. You have some transits that last for 24 hours, others last for 20 years, and so we go through those. But I want to believe anyway that what if we are continuing our own self growth, sometimes that one stage has served its purpose, and then we're left wondering, scratching our heads, well, what's next if we haven't figured it out? And then we just simply journey into the unknown, and then we begin to start paying attention again to what our lives are trying to tell us, what the world's trying to tell us. So that's part of that kind of a quality of patience, I think, that's required to for self discovery.
Do you find that it's an exciting journey if you are really open to it and you're looking for things that tend to um, pile on one after the other? You get done with something and you get the experience that you wanted, and then something else will pop up, and then you will continue to do that. And so it's kind of like a preset journey that you're putting yourself on sometimes, I think.
Yeah, some would make that argument. I would say that what we're given with, even when we look backwards in what has happened to us as we get older, certain phases, like when we were growing up, what it was like to live in our household with our parents, what it was like to go to school, and all that kind of stuff. That narrative arc that we have constructed for ourselves uh, uh, should change. It will change. Meaning of life will change over time. So what seemed to be for some people, see, high school was a terrible thing, and I wasn't popular, I was miserable, and whatever. 40 years down the road, you might see that differently. It won't change. It won't change the miserableness of it, but it may change the effect that had on you in a positive way. How sometimes these negative experiences ultimately can have become an ally. I'm working with a young client who's had a terrible parent, and who has basically haunted him most of his young life, and has nothing but regret and anger and so forth. So, although that doesn't change, and I'm not asking him to change it, but I'm asking him to re-examine in what way inside that nut of all that negativity is in fact almost like a hidden ally. Can it become a teacher for us? The crappy parts of life, or the mean person who did us, or the guy that screwed us, or whatever, can they actually serve the ally hidden behind the persona of all that negativity, and begin in some way to serve us as an ally, maybe a guide, maybe temporarily, maybe for a long time. But that requires that shifting of perspective, playing with perspective. I think is key to keeping, as you say, an active life, an active mind, and stirring our curiosity about how we're constructed, how the world works. At least that's true for me. So I can only claim that's true for me. But so not all people are born curious, right? So for some people, it's not what's the big deal, but for others, it's a big deal.
Do you find that there are that in some of the people that you've worked with over time, that they're just afraid to reach out, to learn something new, to have
Yeah,
to really review the experiences of life that they've had and put the best construction on it so that they understand what they're really about?
I would say most people over time, sometimes immediately, don't have a problem on the cognitive narrative level describing what happened. The problem becomes is being able, if in fact we're in therapy, and if they're trying to kind of loosen the load, so to speak, that they've been dragging around for all this time, then that's a different. Then you have to step into the intuitive. Then you have to have the courage and encouragement and support to dig down deep and be begin to get in touch with some of those not only negative experiences of say, an owner as parent, but maybe of yourself. Try to search for that emotional truth, digging into anger, sadness, feelings of abandonment. That's a different kind of thing. That requires a different kind of patience, and that's, I think, where I wouldn't say people are afraid of it. It's just unknown territory. And so I've had some people that we get up to the edge of that, and they just kind of like, we're not going there. We're going to deflect the conversation, and that's okay. Not everybody has to. Not everybody has to metabolize every grief, every act of unkindness that came your way, anytime, every type of victimization you were subject to. But if you want to get that full integration, this gets into Jung's idea of individuation, then it's required. I think it's a happy necessity to be able to get in touch with that darker side and own it, not discard it, not repress it. Because if you repress it, it just becomes a ghost that's running your life. In other words, you're 70 years old, your father's been dead for 20 years, you're still trying to please him. You're still trying to shoot park golf, or you're still trying to make 200,000 a year like your dad wanted you to. And you, at some point, you have that you have to have that willingness to say, I'm ready to let go, and see what comes with it. So that sounds easy, but it's very hard to do. I think it's on my website, maybe in my book, but the Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron, a great one-liner, which I think speaks to what therapy is all about. Let your heart break and drop the story. Let your
Oh,
heart break and drop the story. So it's easy to say, right? Oh, drop the story, no problem. Heartache, yeah. In other words, you have to give up all your story stuff about you, what made you into you, or how you got victimized by this person, and drop all that stuff. Drop all that cognitive narrative meaning making that's on a rational level, and go deeper and go closer to where something we would call heartache or anger, or like as I say, feelings of being abandoned. That's a tough thing to do, because a lot of times people, if it's a parent, for example, have decidedly mixed feelings about, even if the parent who really did them wrong as a child, I mean, really victimized them emotionally, there's still that part. They go, well, yeah, she was still my mom, though. She was still my dad, though. And so part of that is being able to, at least on a temporary basis, to hold both being true. So it's a contradiction. Let's hold the contradiction that my old man was a drunken SOB who beat my mother and terrorized us kids. And by the way, he did come to my ball games, and we always had Sunday together. Dinner together was always fun. Those are contradictory, and to choose one or the other is to deny something really important, in how we hold that person. So again, it's an old Jungian trick in terms of called tension of the opposites. We hold those until, if we'll call it for lack of a better word, a resolution comes to us. We can't go out and choose it, but if we are patient enough with ourselves, it's a kind of spiritual maturity. That answer or that resolution, in whatever shape, will come, but it'll come in its own time, its own way. We can't make it happen, which I think for a lot of people is frustrating. Because they think, my God, I'm going to solve my problems. I'm going to go into therapy. I'm going to get this thing done. And suddenly we're left with the one thing you're good at, your rational mind. It's like that's the one tool you can't use here. You got to go into feeling or intuition and patience to understand the ways in which we can lean into that. The resolution will come to us when it is ready, not when we're ready. When it is ready to do what it wants to do with us.
it's interesting. I had a friend that we were trying to get deeper into. She was very superficial and lived very superficial life, and went from one thing to another. But we tried to get her to go deeper and to say, well, how are you really feeling? Search for it and reach down for it. She started to cry, and that's all she could do.
Yeah. Yeah.
She couldn't verbalize it. She couldn't really understand it, but it's all she did is cry. And
That's it right there. I mean, you just have to hold. If sadness or grief, for example, if I'm reading into what you're saying, if that's her core emotional truth, at least in that moment or this period of her life, well, you don't want to go into meaning making. You want to just say, that's it. It's just the rage, just the tears, and just to stay with it. That is your truth, and you've tapped that, and you've allowed yourself. I think by tapping down once, if you need to, and sometimes many people do or choose to, be able to go back down there again. See, the thing is it's more than just uh, having a cathartic moment, which can be helpful, not always, but can be. But I like to believe that those of us who have had those moments, one or two or many during our lifetimes, it's as though it's refreshing our own humanity. We're drilling down into, those tears, that grief, that rage. That's a part of our humanity, and if we lock that off, then we can't. Our humanity just can't all be sunshine and roses. To fully embrace all that, we have to acknowledge the bad with the good, or the ugly with the good and the bad, to be fully there. I mean, Carl Jung, I think, in his own way, I'm expressing his ideas in my way, but he would say that it's that capacity to know the shadow, to embrace that, to work on the integration of things that have wounded us and left us splintered, and to bring those together. Part of that is finding that truth, our emotional truth, and acknowledging that. And frankly, sometimes giving ourselves a pat on the back for saying, "Yeah, you did it." I mean, nothing more needs to be said. You got it, and I don't need to know more, and you don't need to say more if you don't want to. You know what I mean? So
Oh, exactly. And I know you've been a student of Western philosophy, Eastern philosophy. We hear the name Carl Jung a lot, but I don't know that a lot of people understand the type of work that he did and what he was all about. Can we just take a moment so that you can
sure,
kind of enlighten our audience about who was
sure.
Carl Jung?
Well, actually, it started in the late 19th century, but their better work in the early 20th century. There was Freud and Jung were arguably the two pioneers of depth psychology. In other words, they fully embraced the idea of the unconscious at a time when most so-called psychology or psychiatry wasn't even really psychology, poo-pooed all of that kind of stuff. If they were going to make it at all, they had to make it as scientists in a medical world. Well, both deviated in their own way, but But Jung was younger than Freud, and was the heir apparent until they had a huge split over both in terms of personality, but also some of Freud's beliefs in kind of libido as the driving force in life. Jung didn't believe that, and so, but Jung went off the deep end for 10 years, or roughly. I'm getting my dates, roughly 1912 to 19 in the early 20s, and that's when he developed his Red Book. He was a calligraphy written, all these different stories of mandalas that he drew, the characters of his own imagination that stayed with him through that time. So I think he teetered on the edge of madness, and other people who've written about him would say that. But from that, he began during that time, still worked and evolved what we now know as analytical psychology, which is now called Jungian psychology. His successor, James Hillman, developed archetypal psychology. Hillman took out over the Jung Institute in 1959. But during that time, Carl Jung was, I think, I'm biased, of course, eclipsed, I think, in terms of the volume of work, the integration of the idea of soul. He introduced a spiritual dimension to our own development, but really did an enormous amount about mapping out the soul, about the nature of psyche. I mean, he wrote volumes, and people have written volumes about him. So the works by and about Carl Jung are almost endless. And today there are another a couple generations, I think, of people who are considered neo-Jungians, have their base philosophy based in Jungian psychology. But individuation, as I mentioned before, that's a key concept. The tension of the opposites, that's another one. His key precepts for the average person are few but very profound. And like I say, but if you're going to be a Jungian analyst, which means you got to take on numerous years of studying his works, and some people I know go back to Zurich and study there. Others do it here with various schools here in the United States. They've dedicated almost to, I think personally, to almost canonizing him, almost making him almost a celebrity status in terms of who Carl Jung was. His famous quote was, "Thank God I'm not a Jungian. I'm just Carl Jung." So, but it's become a buzzword. It's become a touch point for a lot of people. Jungian, this and that. Oh, a travel study. Let's go to Croatia and Jung, or so a lot of people have multiple books and cottage industries under the broad umbrella of Jungian studies. Now, that's not to say Freud did not and still has his impact. I'm not much of a scholar about Freud, because Freud died in London in 1939. He was only there for a short time with his daughter, Anna, who eventually came here. But most of his family was exterminated by the Nazis in Vienna in the late 30s. So he and his daughter, and I think maybe a housemaid or whatever, managed to escape. But Freud had the great misfortune of having cancer. I don't know if it was the larynx, but he had a whole prosthesis that he had to take in and out every day. It was really difficult.
Ew.
And so during that time, he was well known for having a great affection for cocaine. So just to dull the pain, but yeah, he died far too young. And of course, his books are also tremendously important. And when I was a kid, or high school, junior high actually, I started reading Freud, and although I didn't understand most of what I was reading, but I was intrigued by it. I didn't have a frame of reference, but those two basically evolved. They were the spearhead for what we call depth psychology. And what does it mean, depth psychology? In a really basic way, it just means it encompasses the idea that there is an unconscious, that we have below us, however you want to describe it, a deep pit of unknown in us, a personal unconscious, and Jung's contribution was the collective unconscious. So as all of humanity, we share an unconscious. We share what would be described, and Hillman did more of this, archetypal symbology that is embedded in all of us. Now, it may have different faces and symbols, United States versus Indonesia versus Siberia or Africa, but the hero, the sage, the great mother, those things are resonant within this. It's kind of in the imaginal realm, but those archetypal forces within us can be triggered, and when they do, they're fairly autonomous in the way they can sometimes take over. For example, in my book, I talk about the orphan archetype. So those of us who went through adoption, and even though I was adopted by a great family, I think from that earliest wound as an infant, being separated from mother and child, I basically inherited the orphan archetype. I mean, and it became a silent driver. And I think a lot of aspects of my life, that took me a lot of growing up and a lot of education to realize that what was in there. But you can see it with clients. It's quite easy to spot sometimes, because partly most of us, all of us have some kind of complex, a mother complex, a father complex. We also have those other forces, and so that unites us in a way that makes us much on the soul level, on the unconscious level, much more in common. One more thing about Jung. At age 83, so he died, I think, in 61. This is it was published just before his death, I think. Memories, Dreams, and Reflection. And again, I use this roughly as a template for my own book. In that, as he chose to write about his life, he didn't write about most of the things that he did. The outer events, the people. There's just some mention of people he met and places he was, but largely it's a excavation of the interior that he begins at an earliest stage, and he's sharing with us the thoughts that he had when he was really that young. Not to make a bad pun, but see if I can find the quote. I don't think I can do right now. Anyway.
Well, Stephen, while you're looking at the quote, I need to take a quick break real quick.
Okay.
It's just going to be 30 seconds. Stephen Rowley is our guest, and he's written the book, The Lost Coin, a memoir of adoption and destiny. And we're going to be talking about that from predominantly the rest of the show. But I also wanted to get his thoughts on spirituality and energy and all the things that they're talking about now that are very much in line with what Jung used to or talked about. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay right with us, please.
They have your eyes. They have your ears. They have your smile. Now all they need is a little more of your time. Make a difference in your child's life, because anyone can be a father. It takes time to be a dad.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. We're talking with Stephen Rowley. He is an author. He's a psychotherapist. He does all kinds of. He's been studying his whole life. It's just amazing to me. And he's written the book, The Lost Coin, a memoir of adoption and destiny, which we're going to touch on quite a little bit here. But I wanted to ask you, first of all, now, Jung, with what he taught in conjunction with what people are believing more today about energy and about um, uh, our energetic footprint in the world and that kind of stuff, is that part of that whole philosophy?
Not in a direct sense. I think of those luminaries like people, the Einsteins, the Shakespeares, Freud, certainly Jung, a couple of these seminal, really people critical in the evolution of human beings. When they appear on the scene, and by the time they've talked and worked with and written all they're going to work, it's just like a starburst. So it goes out. And just like as we see an explosion of a supernova, that gas, those planets, that particles just go out in the universe. They go in all directions. And so some people can tie what their particular art or craft or approach to body work or energy work or spiritual work. Some can directly tie it back to it, and some don't. Mark Epstein, as an example, was a Buddhist psychiatrist in New York, and a number of books. His book called The Art of Zen Therapy. I mean, that's a great book. So now he's not a Jungian; he's a Freudian, but his spiritual roots go back to I think Thailand or maybe Cambodia. Ajahn Chah is who he studied with. So he brings in spirituality with Freudian or depth psychological terms, and he's kind of carved out something that I found really easy to kind of understand and do. But that's just a minor example of how the influence of depth psychology has reached so many other places, so many other people. So some like to tie their roots back to one of the biggies. Others either don't know or don't care.
Well, and at the end of the day, don't you need to go within and to meditate and to feel what resonates with you, regardless of who it is or the philosophy that they're talking about? If it resonates with you at a deep soul level, is that something that you should just follow, or should you follow the works of other people like Jung or Neil Donald Walsh or any of the other folks that are out there?
And my answer is a little like I heard the Dalai Lama once say when asked a question. I think this was at Stanford. Somebody with a microphone in the back asked, "Your Holiness, is there a God or no God?" And he goes, "Yes." Next question.
And that is so true.
So this is where I think, and we all are subject to this, where if we catch ourselves being prescriptive. I know it's good for you. You should do this. Who am I to say what is right for people? What path? There's so much other. Well, this presentation I'm doing, that I'm still developing the first of the three. I'm actually deviating from. I think I talk about Jung and individuation, but then I hop over into the world of art. Matisse's Bathers by the River, which is in the Chicago Art Institute. It was in a show back in 2010 where they took it's a gigantic painting. It's probably 24 feet long, I think, and 10, 12 feet high. They went back with some kind of X-ray type technology and went back through all the layers of paint. It took him 8 years to paint this during the prelude up to and including the beginning of World War I. So you see not only the evolution by panel and layer by layer of this painting, because what it looks like in the beginning, actually it looks like Bathers by a River, but that's the first thing he did. 8 years later, it looks like an existential freak show. It got denuded pictures, no forms, no faces, no hands, all gray. And so you watch by the means of this technology, and actually it's interactive. I still have the link to that. You can see what his own process was for developing the painting over that time, which is unbelievable in itself, as his own style evolved during that time. But then I make the point, I think this is a great visual representation of what we all are part of in terms of our own individuation, our own change. we're going layer by layer. We're going panel by panel. And what we look like today doesn't look like much like when we were 5 years old, but if we go down deep enough, we'll find it there. For some people, that's enormously informative. It's almost a relief to kind of go, yeah, I can see my life is in motion. It's not static. It's not a. It's more than just a couple of photographs. It's looking at a process. I don't think I'm answering your question, but I think what was your question at the beginning?
I forgot.
Okay. Well, it was good to riff on that anyway. But yeah, this reckoning of do we well, even for, like I say with clients, you come to me and you say, I'm going through a divorce and I need help navigating through this whole thing. I go, great. So there's a problem, and the solution, if we can define it as such, is coming out on the other end being more or less intact. You sort navigated. Fine. Problems, more or less a solution. If that's what you came to therapy for and that's what you got and you're happy, great. I also say, and it's fine with me if we end, but I also say to clients coming in, I said, you'll get to that place where you feel like you've accomplished something, kind of the end of a phase. Now, if you want to go for broke and then continue to explore your own personal growth, that's another thing. The therapy itself might look and feel different, but still a form of psychotherapy. And that's, for some people go, yeah, that sounds great, let's do it. And others, it's like, no, I did what I came for. Now, who am I to judge what's right? There's the worst thing to be in a position of saying, no, I really think you have to work in your personal growth. I mean, who am I to say? So
No.
you have to really let it in the hands of the person and their own sense of the. James Hollis talks about the 3 precepts for healing, one of which is recovering personal authority. And sometimes recovering personal authority means you learn how to comfortably say no. No, thank you. No, I'm not doing that.
That is, for us people pleasers, that's a big time deal to be able to say no, or because we're conditioned throughout our lifetime to be nice, be kind, but there are times when you have to stand your ground and maintain your boundaries as well.
Yeah, and when we do that, now this can be, I've seen this done. I've done it a little myself in my practice. I've seen people I study with in dream work to horrifying images in a nightmare. When you can go up to the monster in your nightmare, replay it in your mind, and go, no, stop, no. It's interesting to see when we do that, or to another person who's our abuser, for example, or you're not going to let somebody walk over to you again. When we do that, no, and even though it's uncomfortable, it's out of our comfort zone, is to have some presence of mind, either in the moment or soon after, to kind of go, what else came up when I said no? Who else told me I couldn't say no? Who told me that I can't say no? Where did that come from? We trace that back. It's always an interesting story, and where that prohibition crept its way, or a teacher, or a coach, or whatever, and more or less, it's another way of saying, no, you can't be what you want to be. You've got to be what I want you to be. If you're going to make me happy, then you better go to pharmacy school. Don't go into acting school. Don't become an actor. That's folly.
And that happens so much. That happens to a lot of us because of what we would like to do. By the way, we are talking to Stephen Rowley, and when we come back from this station break, we are going to talk about his book, The Lost Coin, a memoir of adoption and destiny, which is just out in 2023. And we're going to talk about that and adoption in general, and how it can, like my mother-in-law, it affected her entire life from beginning to end. And she, to her dying day, she felt like she was unloved because she was adopted, even though that wasn't the case. We're going to be right back after this message.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
As you go about your daily life, look closer. As you gather with family and friends who love and support you, look closer. There are youth right in your community who don't have the home, warmth, and healing you have. So look closer. Every year across America, a staggering 4.2 million youth are homeless or trafficked. And for 50 years, Covenant House has worked relentlessly to keep them safe and protected. Tonight, 2,000 young people will sleep safely in a Covenant House bed. And tomorrow, they will wake up surrounded by love. They get clean clothes, hot meals, medical care, and a safe place to sleep. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In sites across America to help them fulfill the great promise of their lives. So look closer at Covenant House. To help or get help, go to covenanthouse.org.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Stephen Rowley is our guest. He is a psychotherapist and a writer. He lives in a beautiful area. I'm not going to tell you where but I can tell you a quick story. The last day I did my show in 2003, one of the calls I got to change my life was Carol from Bainbridge Island. You don't know Carol by chance, do you? She was 20 years ago, she was a Alzheimer's caregiver. And they used to listen to my show every day that I was doing at that time because her patient or the person she was caring for I could still reach her because of the laugh that I did and all that kind of stuff.
I think, well, of course, there's more than one Carol that lives over here. But it does bring up, I haven't seen her in a long time, but there was a woman by the name Carol, I think. She was the third Gidget.
The third Gidget? What is that exactly?
Well, what was it? Was a show called Gidget on TV way back when.
Oh, yes,
and
yes.
You know, and it was like the Flying Nun. It was like a Gidget show. And anyway.
And that was Sally Field.
The other one that another star who's no longer with us was Richard Johnson, who was the professor on Gilligan's Island. He lived here.
Oh, yes. Did he pass away?
Yeah. Well, we were both invited as a celebrity when I was superintendent to wreath making in Bainbridge Island Gardens, and Junko Harui was still alive at that time. It did this every year, and you had to bring a theme around what you did. So I brought a thing with yellow pencils and some little books and a school bus, a yellow school bus. Richard Johnson showed up with this long plastic box with a professor doll in it, hung it on the wreath, and left.
Yeah, and Gilligan's Island.
You can't make this stuff up.
No, you can't. And Alan Hale Jr. and the entire cast of characters. That was a great show. I enjoyed that show. But I want to talk about your book because I think your book is something that will help a lot of people, because adoption, you were adopted, and as you know, it can throw somebody from birth on into a whole different world and it's difficult to regain yourself from that, as did my mother-in-law, because her mother, they found out years later, was 16. She was single in 1930. So she went to one of those homes. It's like kids would disappear. They'd go to a home, they'd have the baby, then they go back to school and stuff. And he one day brought this baby home. And I'm heard that there was $5,000 involved or something like that. But
I was born in such a home. I was born in the Willows Maternity Sanitarium in Kansas City, Missouri. On my 75th birthday last February, I had a buddy who's a historian who lives in Manhattan, Kansas, and well known in the Kansas City area. So we did a co-presentation on the Willows Maternity Sanitarium. He did a PowerPoint on the home. It was Kansas City in the 30s, 40s, 50s, even the 60s was considered the hub of adoption in the United States. There were maybe up to at some points a dozen homes or hospitals for unmarried women. The one I went to, the Willows, was considered the Ritz. It was quite a place because they advertised all over the country. They advertised in a national magazine, so they drew people from all over and people who had means. Now, my birth mother did not have means, but they got me there anyway. But so I want to make it. So we did a press. He did about the Willows, and then I got up and did a synopsis of my book. And I would say we had about 80 people there. I think probably I'm going to say 60 were also like me, born at the Willows back in the day, and just both what people did in terms of resonating with my story, and then they told parts of their story. Again, good stories, happy stories, heartbreaking stories, surprise stories, all over the map. My point that I made with them, and the point of the book, is that and this makes the distinction between adoption and our birth. My adoption at its age 6 months to a really great family. I grew up in privileged circumstances, but it's that wound. My contention is the wound of separation of the child and the birth parent. Nancy Verrier's book called the primal wound, and that wound, I contend, for many of us, I certainly can't say it's for all, but for many of us, that's what stays with us. Now, for some people, even if you have a really great adoption, it still stays with you. And so, when I was age 13, I read about this in the book. I asked my mother that I wanted to know more about where I came from, and she flipped a gasket and said, "Don't you think we love you enough?" And went on like that. So I swore that day that I would never ever talk to her about my adoption or about my birth parents or where I came from ever again, and I didn't. Much to my embarrassment, but I never did. Now we had a reconciliation on her 100th birthday, but and it's also in the book, but that's a little bit far afield for the moment right now. But it affects everybody differently. So all those adoption stories, including, is it your mother-in-law? Is that what it was?
Yeah, my mother-in-law.
All those, there may be some themes that run through the adoption world, but at the end of the day, all of those stories are different. Every single person has its different story, but the story we carry within us, this is why being a psychotherapist gives some insight to this. That's where we're a lot more like each other. Like I mentioned before, many of us have what I would call the orphan archetype within us. Now, for some people, that's just psychobabble. Nor do they think they have something running around unhappy inside of it. I've had a couple of people say, "What gives you the right? My adoption was the happiest day of my life. Why would I want to know anything more than that?" And I go, "Great for you." I mean, I wouldn't say you should do anything more, but for many people, the curiosity to know more or to reconnect, if that's possible, is so profound, and it becomes a lifelong preoccupation, so to speak. That's why 23andMe and Ancestry has just exponentially upped the capacity for those kinds of reunions, but still, it doesn't solve everything, and sometimes through those means we can run. I have a client who's run into the fact that his parentage, although isn't Pablo Escobar, but it was closely related to the family. Closely. He's a spitting image of Pablo Escobar at age 40. But that's not somebody you want to have a reunion with. He's dead. But they didn't want to have anything to do with him or his birth mother. Arguably, they were both at risk of being killed when he was born. And so he was secreted to the United States. She left for parts unknown. And there's a lot of people, criminal types, or people who, you're the result of an affair of an important person. They don't want you to be known. They don't want you to show up at their doorstep, regardless of how you feel. So those are all those hard realities that are just examples. But there's things we are discovering our parentage all the time. There's a family member who was quite sure she had a certain European background, just found out through 23 years there's no such thing as her family tree. Well, this is a shock.
Yeah.
Or a guy who was on a podcast early on, and he talked about being at his 30th high school reunion. A girl he knew from the time he was in elementary school came over and said, "Bob, I've known you all this time, but I've always been hesitant to ask, but what was it like being adopted?" And he's like, "Huh?" He had no idea. So you run into those things too. Sometimes people have good reasons to, sometimes not very good reasons, to tell kids when they're young they were adopted, and some eventually do, but sometimes much later in life. Teenagers, even much later in life, and the older you get, the bigger the shock. I could say that. It's a huge shock to find out this stuff.
And I agree with you. Now, my mother-in-law is, as an example, it seemed like the loss of the love of her 16-year-old mom, even though realistically you look at it, and it was 1930. She had no hope. She had to do what she did. But because of the loss of that, the love that was expressed to her from her adoptive parents, who were very kind and loving, and they're a little older, and through the extended family that tried to embrace her, it wasn't quite good enough because it wasn't my mom. Is that
Right.
that that affected everything about her life. We went to a family reunion and she never got close to anybody because that's not my real family.
Right. Well, that's true for some people. It's not always true for others. In my family, I consider my mom and my dad and my three siblings as my, I mean, my birth mother's over here. I don't confuse the two, but for others, it's way more difficult. Who's to say why? To me, it's what we find out or don't, or how we respond emotionally over time or not. We have a hand in what we can do if we're lucky to have the resources to maybe go into therapy for a while to help resolve this. But if not, there's a in the book, James Hillman, his book called The Soul's Code. He talks about in Plato's Republic, the idea from an old myth that before we're born, we choose the circumstances of our lives. We choose the people, the parents, the jobs, the lovers, the spouses, the location. We choose everything. And I tell my clients when we do this, it's like, don't believe this, but don't not believe it. Let's just hold it for a moment as it true, possibly true. So we choose that, but then just a moment before we're born, pow, we forget it all. And so I will say to somebody, who's wrapped up in a big fat mess in their life and they can't find any way out and they're stuck. And I said, just using that setup, imagine that you actually chose your circumstances right now. You're the one who chose this. Just imagine that was true. So if that was true, why do you think you would have done that to yourself? What is your misery right now, or your bollocks up the circumstances, your life in a big fat knot? To what end is this all about? What it should be about? That creates a very different kind of conversation. What I got in my book, I got fired from a high profile job in Silicon Valley, and for some time I would step thinking, God, how did I play into this? Did I design this? I mean, it was a great escape from a job I didn't like. It wasn't the escape route I would have planned. Otherwise, I didn't think. But I needed to have that event in the long run be one of the great gifts of my life, to really basically live in misery for a long time. I couldn't get employed for 2 years. We were running out of money, even though my wife had a job, but we're in Silicon Valley. It's expensive to live there. And I got a job finally after 2 years, but that was a lot of sitting around. Although it was also a time where a lot of my interest in Buddhism came through. I was involved with the Dalai Lama Foundation, saw the Dalai Lama on many occasions, wanted a small reception in Pasadena. Those are life-changing. I played golf with a Tibetan Lama, a whole round of golf with him in Carmel Valley. Picture that.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
It was cool because you're kind of like, oh my God, this guy is like he's way older. At that time he was 70. He hadn't played very long. Of course, the other three one who put it together, we were like, okay, no swearing, no, don't say the F word. And he puttered around for a while, and I joke in the book like, oh, he wanted a 3-foot gimme on that. Oh yeah, he's an exalted spiritual entity. Who am I to say? Forget it. But anyway, that kind of his tenderness and his just being in his presence was overwhelming. In fact, in the book I talk about, we had a cans of Pepsi at the 19th hole, and I knew I was being given an opportunity. I actually won the opportunity in a silent auction, so I got to be in his cart, and we had a couple moments, and I'm thinking, oh God, I need to ask him something. What will I do? So I just asked him about beginner's mind, which is a Suzuki Roshi Zen founded the San Francisco Zen Center. And I don't remember exactly what I asked. I mumbled something about beginner's mind, and I don't remember what he said to me. What I do remember was that he reached over, and we were pretty sweaty, just took my hand in his and just patted it and said, just be patient with yourself. That was it. I mean, it was just unbelievably profound. I can't put it into words, but something's gone on here. To me, it was a form of transmission. Just when I was the Dalai Lama, I had a dream the night after I saw him in the small reception. Sharon Stone was sitting right in front of me in all her glory, and it was right out of what's the movie show with Michael Douglas?
Oh gosh.
She's got her legs spread. Okay, so
I
was having a flashback of the movie with Sharon. I got to know Sharon Stone a little bit, but anyway. I had this dream that he was in it, and he was dressed in maroon robes and handed me what felt like the form of a child, a baby wrapped in this maroon, his maroon. He was dressed like an EMT person, not as a Tibetan, as an emergency worker. Handed me this form, grabbed my head in the dream with both hands, and when it hit my head, it just like in the dream, it was just a golden explosion, just wow. I mean, I woke up out of that dream. It's like, what happened? It's like that energy field stayed with me all morning. I ran down to the Pasadena Playhouse where he was speaking, and ran back to the green room where the friends who had put this thing together. And I said, "You'll never guess what happened. Here was the dream. It was unbelievable. He gives me this thing in my golden light." And one of the guys kind of slightly cynically chuckling. He goes, "Well, hey, stupid, don't you know that's the way he works?" So that was it doesn't matter whether it's quote true or not. My experience, it was something was transmitted to me in that experience through that dream that is ineffable, is beyond explanation. It's a folly to try to make sense out of it, other than the fact it was an incredible experience, and it really deepened my understanding of Buddhism, led me to other people who were in. So even though I was broke during that time, I was led also into a period of being a lot of connection with other major spiritual exalted personages in the Buddhist tradition. So that was I was sent from the heavens. I mean, in a time when I was really damn miserable, suddenly here this stuff happens.
Let me ask you a question, because this has happened in my own life. Now that I've been around the planet a while, and I can now look back at episodes in my life and how they played out and who was instrumental in bringing them to where I ended up, going from one place to another. There were people involved that are no longer in my life, haven't been for many, many years, and yet they had an instrumental point in turning the direction of my life from one place to another to go to something else, and then they would disappear. And I, now looking back on it, are like, that was an agreement that we made on the other side before we even got here, that this is what they were going to encourage me to do, and then they were going to go do other things that they needed to do. Do I need medication, or does that make sense to you?
Well, maybe both. Who knows? Well, in my book, one of the last quotes, there's a lot of, I think, interesting quotes in the book, but one is Joseph Campbell, whose quote is, "Life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived." So the answer, so to observe your own mind, looking for, well, true or not true, or fill in the blanks, or write an essay on that, is to say, as I do with the entirety of the whole book at the end, it's holding the mystery of it that preserves something about that. I'll call it spiritual essence, the essence of soul, the unknown. Maybe we're not supposed to know. Maybe we can't know. Maybe we designed it early never to know. We said no to ourselves way back. But anyway, that evokes, I think, when we get haunted by that, even like the case of your sister-in-law or mother-in-law, with a sense of uncompleted yearning, a yearning to connect, not being able to connect, yearning for more. Yeah, it probably did come out of adoption and all that stuff. But it's interesting to like, well, why is this the energy or the psychodynamic that I seem to be holding all these years? To what end? I can say for myself, that sense of yearning that I had, I still do in many ways, not as much as I used to, led me into some very interesting places in life. It made me more curious. It made me want to pull closer to other people when sometimes I felt like I wanted to push away, particularly when I was younger, with other women. So like, yeah, I want to have a lot of girlfriends, but I don't want to, I want to kiss 1,000 frogs, but I don't think I want to do more than that. That's that underlying sense of yearning, of wanting to know more, wanting to connect. I think those are things for some of us, I'd call lucky enough, even though it can be painful at times, if we become aware of that drive, like I said, become aware of the orphan archetype, then we can begin to see how it's serving us. If we say, I'm not going there, I don't want to look at that, I don't want to go any deeper in therapy or talking about my abandonment. It's too hard, it's too touchy, it just makes me freak out. Well, then at that point, and we can ease into that. We don't have to do it all at once, but if we don't even ease into it, then it becomes like a ghost that haunts our lives. It begins to write the script of our life. And we want to know, why do these other things happen? Well, that the ghost writer, so to speak, is still creating that script out of that unresolved issues, whether it's from adoption, other forms of trauma. I mean, there's the other forms of trauma that can have the same effect, or vastly greater in number than the developmental trauma that comes out of separation of mother and child. It's very real, but a lot of times the way it casts into motion the mindset, the feelings the behaviors that we manifest in time. A lot of people have that underlying trauma, and they're way more than we realize. I mean, and a lot of people have just we're bred in this culture, for the most part, to keep it tamped down and keep your mouth shut about it.
Yeah.
Or that it's dangerous in some cases. If you wanted to say, I got molested by Uncle Joe, my dad's best friend and brother, well, and the great friend of the family, who are you going to bust all that up with your story?
Yeah.
I mean, there's those kind of prohibitions that sometimes we believe anyway, we need to kind of keep tamped down. Complicated stuff.
No question about it. And that actually is what makes life the adventure of a lifetime, because it's, if you look at it from a positive standpoint, like I tend to, which is I'm looking forward to the next adventure that I get to have, even if it's an experience with an individual or a thought or a place or a thing. May not be perfect, but it's allowing me to learn more about who I am, how I respond to things, and stuff like that. We've been talking with Stephen Rowley. Stephen, I want you to tell our audience, and we've just got about a minute and a half. I'd love for you to tell our audience anything that you'd like them to know.
There's a quote in my book. It's an apt. It's so neat. The quote is, "Everybody gets what they deserve, whether they deserve it or not."
That's a good quote.
That actually is from a famous, not that famous, but a famous Buddhist. I'll leave you with one other one. This is even better. We got enough time.
Yeah.
I begin the book. Well, actually, I have a wonderful poem by William Stanford. But where did it go? Oh, okay. So what we're talking about, in so many ways, one might say our conversation about all these big questions that don't seem to have answers we don't have at the moment. So this comes from Rainer Maria Rilke, who was an Austrian poet at the turn of the last century. But I love this. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers. That's a killer. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given you, because you would not be able to live them. That's a tough one too. That's a no. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. Without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. So these questions we carry around, like, what's the purpose? What's my meaning? A to Z, whatever those questions are. Where would I really come from? Why did my mother give me up here? Whatever those are, just someday, if we keep them with us, we'll live into the answer. What does that mean? I mean, it's a poetic expression. That's why poetry is so powerful. It's not telling you exactly how and when and why. You'll live into it. You'll live into it. And I think that it has that kind of promise about the capacity for self-understanding that exists in us all, in front of us all. It's just that some are driven by that energy, others are not. And I think I can only say for myself, probably for you too, that that's a kind of a provocative energy that keeps us not only alive and kicking, but makes us the unique people we are.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Again, Stephen Rowley has been our guest. Go to his website, which is stephenrowley108.com. Find out all about him, and you can get the book. And if they want to contact you, if somebody is dying to work with you, are you still taking patients?
Yeah. My contact information. The website there's one called Memoir, which is all about the book. The others are about my practice, my background, and so forth. All my contact information is there. You can find my name on Psychology Today as well.
Ooh, Psychology Today. That's you.
Well,
You're
all of us therapists, for our $30 a month or whatever, we have it's like a little webpage. You have your picture, all about your practice, your licensing and all that stuff. I mean, we all do it. It's a way of advertising. But no, you can go directly on my website.
what you should say is it's very special that I get to be in that magazine. And they asked me, and I told them for years I wouldn't do it, and then they finally anyway.
Okay, what you said.
I really appreciate having you here,
Sure.
and I love talking with you. You're such a learned man, and I love the premise of your book, The Lost Coin: A Memoir of Adoption and Destiny. And I want to thank you again for being here. I know
Kevin, thank you.
You got people you got to go see. So thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Our purpose is to provide everyone with a positive, entertaining, and educational experience. I would love your feedback and comments about the show, including possible topics and great guest suggestions. Please email me at kevin@kmmedia.pro. And remember, be kind to one another because each other's all we've got. That's Kevin at kmmedia.pro.